record on this computer. First thing, I made it awful. I made,
beautiful.
Pardon?
It's beautiful, the room.
Thank you. I made an awful mistake last week. Can you, okay, let me just, which was very embarrassing. Well, it's not embarrassing. I'm an imperfect being. Plus, I'm not technically a Sanskrit teacher. I teach Sanskrit just to help the students out, but I'm not. Can you see this? Okay, you can't.
Oh, we see you.
Right, let's just do this. Hang on. Okay, we do this. Then we go down and screen share. Okay. So awful mistake. So if you took a shot of the our business last week, get rid of it. Don't forward it. Please don't forward it to anybody. And rather take a shot of this. I don't know how to get you this. So the verb is klish. And I have a little bit from the Sanskrit dictionary here, right? And you look it up in the Sanskrit dictionary. Remember, what are we doing? The klishta business, okay? And we had a little chart yesterday. And we connected the kleshas with klishta. And then, so the vrittis, there's 5 kinds of vrittis. Vrittayaha, panchatayaha, sutra number 5. The vrittis are either klishta or klishta. And we connected that with the kleshas. So then we were looking at the kleshas, and what's the opposite? If the kleshas produce klishta vrittis, but Patanjali in verse number 5 says there's aklishta vrittis, and so then we engage the idea, well, what does that mean, aklishta vrittis? The commentators don't really do very much with this, surprisingly. So now I have a much better, more sophisticated, and I made some mistakes in the diacritics yesterday, so please don't send that around. I don't know how to attach this such that you can download it, but maybe Eleonora does. But anyway, the root is klish, okay? You look it up in the dictionary, and it says things like to torment, trouble, molest, cause pain, okay? You can see you can obviously can't read, you can read the English, to suffer, feel pain, torment, cause pain. So that's the range of what it means. Now, these 5 vrittis are states of mind. They're either klishta or aklishta. So then we connected them, you know, because klishta is a verbal form. Here I've written it past passive participial form of klish. Sanskrit roots give an infinity of forms, verbal forms, nominal forms, noun, and so forth. Maybe not an infinity, but a very large number. So what is klishta vis-a-vis the root verb? Okay, root verb is klish, up here, klish. And from that, you get all kinds of verbal and nominal derivations. So klishta is a past passive participial form. So that means, like in English, it would be things like dead. So to die is the verb, and dead is past. It's passive because you're dead, and it's past, and it's a participial form. You can't just say dead. A participial means it's an adjective, a verbal adjective. You can't say dead. You have to say something's dead. You can't just throw out the word dead, then it's an incomplete sentence, right? So that's a past passive participle, participial or participial, that means adjectival. The opposite is aklishta, right? So the klishtas come from the kleshas, and the aklishta is the opposite. You could say aklesha. It's just not nothing wrong with saying aklesha. Grammatically wrong with it. It's just not a word you find. So if the first is avidya, well, that's the klishta vritti that we think we're body mind, and we don't, remember Patanjali says to confuse the eternal, blissful, pure Atman with a non-Atman, which is not eternal, not blissful, not pure. But what's the opposite of avidya? Well, vidya, you take the off. It's also known as jnana. And when we get to the 8 limbs, it's going to be known as viveka. And even before, we're going to get the word viveka. So that's the opposite. So therefore, vrittis, the content of which is vidya, knowledge, I'm Atman, the goal of life is to seek Atman. Let me read Patanjali and learn about meditation. Let me read the Gita, learn how to be in the world. Those kinds of vrittis are aklishta. Now, we know that all vrittis have to be nirodhad in the Patanjalian system, not in karma yoga, but in Patanjalian system. But still, to get there, we have to change the nature of the mind from klishta to at least change it to aklishta. And then we can think about going beyond that even further. So these are all more or less synonyms. Vidya, jnana. Viveka is a slightly more higher level, perhaps. Now, here I made the mistake. I said brahmosmi. last week. Wrong, wrong. Brahman is a neuter noun. So it does not become Brahmaha. I must have been having a senior moment or just, I don't know. So therefore it's Brahma Asmi. Asmi means I am in Sanskrit, it's the first person singular of the root to be, us. You would say Asmi, he is, Asti, you are, Asi. So I am, and Ta is the state. So Asmita is the state of I amness. Now, the Klishta one is, remember Patanjali, Drigdarshana Shaktayor Ekata Iva, to think that the seer and the instruments of sight are the same. The seer is the consciousness, but the instruments of sight is the body and mind. They're instruments. They're not the real self. But to think they're the same thing, to think I am my body and my mind, well, that's Klishta. That's the wrong I am. That's the false ego. Well, what's the right ego then? Well, you see it in Asmita Samadhi, the same word. Obviously, Samadhi state cannot be Klishta. So it's Aklishta, but that's very, very high. And that is when the mind is reflecting the Purusha consciousness back to itself. It's kind of like looking in a mirror. It's still mediated by the mind. It's not Svarupa. It's not situated in its own nature. The reflection is situated in the chitta, but it's a very high state. And once you're at that state, Krishna says in the Gita, you experience this amazing happiness, not the happiness of the Atman, not the Satchidananda Vedanta, not that one, but it's the sukha of the mind. It's the sukha of sattva. Asmita Samadhi. But so that's one opposite of Asmita. Another one might be to say, well, what if I'm not the body and mind, what am I then? Brahmasmi. So that's where I had the typo yesterday. I had Brahmo Smi. Please erase that. Get rid of it. But you can say Daso Smi in Bhakti. I am the servant. Das is a servant. So here it's a masculine noun. Then it becomes Dasaha, becomes Daso, and the gets dropped. But I had the same thing last week. Brahmo Smi. No, wrong. So here's the corrected version. And you can photograph it or maybe, I don't know if there's a way of uploading it. Right, so these are the Aklishta Asmi. What's Raga? That's Klishta. That should be number 3 there. What happened to the number 3? Oh, it should be number 3. I've run out of numbers halfway. There we are. Now, what's the opposite of Raga? Well, without Raga. Vairaga. You wouldn't say araga. You could. Araga. You could, but it's not very common. But much more common is this word vai without ragya. Don't worry about the ya. So the opposite, the klishta is raga, and the aklishta is vairagya. But there is also aklishta desires. You don't have to be without all desires. You have to be without desires for body, mind, seeking happiness through body, mind. But a good desire is mumuksha, the desire for liberation. You can see, it looks a bit like moksha, doesn't it? It's a reduplicated form of the root much. When you reduplicate a stem in Sanskrit, you reduplicate the root, it makes it an intensitive or a desiderative, like very. That's how you get the word Ganga. It's really gum, going. The Ganga is a reduplicated noun. It means going very intensely. So when you reduplicate the verbal stem, what does the reduplication do? How does it alter the meaning of that stem? It either makes it a desiderative, something you desire to do, or it makes it an intensitive, as in the case of Ganga, going. The Ganga, if you go up to Rishikesh, is very strong. So that's the opposite. Desire for liberation is aklishta. You have to have a desire for liberation. Otherwise, why would you take up yoga? But that is not a desire based on body-mind gratification. It's a desire based on Atman. So all of these have to be based on Atman. The right-hand column is Atman, right? The Vividya Jnana Viveka is that which takes you to Atman. Asmita Samadhi is the real Asmi, I'm Atman. Brahmasmi, I'm Atman. Dasosmi, I'm an Atman, but this is Bhakti now. Not only am I an Atman, but I'm the eternal devotee and lover of God. Servant means lover. If you love someone, you serve them, my friends. I know the word in English doesn't have good connotations, but in Sanskrit, you don't have that problem because you have a different word for love of God, seva. And finally, in bhakti, you also have raganuga bhakti, crazy and insane desire for Krishna, like the gopis. They went mad in their love of God. They started talking to trees. They started thinking the bee was a messenger for Krishna. They started imagining that the Krishna had walked here and there because the trees, they just sort of, it was the madness of love. Very, very high state of bhakti, the highest possible state in Krishna bhakti. It's called raga anuga, following raga. But what kind of raga is this? It's not the raga for body and mind. It's raga for Krishna. That's what bhakti is. What else is it? Desire for God. And likewise, dvesha. So what's the aklishta? Well, it's dvesha for maya, dvesha for anything that takes us away. And these are not quite so neat. Abhinivesha, the opposite is abhaya. Okay? So please use this if you are interested in this little sheet. I don't know how to get it to you.
I will put it in the chat. You
Okay,
can add a 4 and a 5 there.
Oh, I have to put a 4 and a 5. Okay, thank you. So I'm sure everyone can figure that out, but yeah, thank you for that. 4, and forgive the, I know I'm not going to bother straightening that up. 5. Okay, there we are. Okay, my friends. So now we stop share and we go to, oh, no, we don't stop share. We go to the, we have to get the Yoga Sutras up behind the screen there. Cannot minimize. Okay, let's just put this. Well, we can go down here. Oh, how about we have some stories, my friends? Just occasionally, yoga stories, because this is how Hindus learn their yoga. So the first word of this chapter, what is the first word of chapter 2? Tapaha. And we said the story. I recited the story. I'd like to read it to you because I would like for you, my secret wish is that you develop an interest in the Bhagavata Purana, which for me is it's my own canonical text, but for me, there's nothing like it. It contains everything. It's called the ripened fruit of the Vedic tree. And okay, that's a little bit, like you might say that's a sectarian sort of thing to say. Fair enough. But I genuinely, everything that you find in Vedanta and Yoga and Sankhya, all of that is there, but so much more. And it's all written in, pretty, very interesting kind of style. So the first word of what do we do if you want to start yoga is tapaha. Now the tradition says, remember the first sutra, the very, very first sutra in chapter 1, Hatha Yoga Anu Shasanam, Patanjali says is going to continue the ancient teaching. So then the question is, well, who, and the commentaries say, well, continue from where? And they speak of Hiranyagarbha. And Hiranyagarbha is Brahma, not Brahman, not the Brahman, but Brahma, the first created being. There's 2 versions of the story. But, by the way, before the story starts, just look at this. When I say this text is, the Bhagavata is full of jnana, look at this. O king, says Shuka, no actual connection can exist between the objects of the world and the conscious transcendent soul. They're 2 completely different things. Western philosophers call it the Cartesian problem, but it's not a problem for reasons we won't get into. It is only because of Maya cast over the soul that this appears to occur. It appears that we're connected to this world. This is just like one who sees objects in a dream. There's no actual connection between the objects and the dreamer in a dream. You're connected with the samskaras, maybe. So this is full of jnana. Don't think these stories they're always interspersed with this and bhakti, but jnana and bhakti. The Atman appears to have many forms, right? We think we're male, female, dog, cat, by dint of Maya, this divine power of illusion, assuming many forms. Enjoying itself in the gunas of Maya, it thinks, I am, that's your asmita, klishta, and this belongs to me. Aham, mama, iti is actually the Sanskrit. Aham, mama, iti, it's common phraseology for asmita, I am. So if I am, aham, then mama, this belongs to me. Aham, mama, iti, this is how we think. when we are under the state of asmita. Aham, I am this, whoever I think I am. Mama, these things belong to me. When, on the other hand, its illusion is dissipated, right? Get rid of avidya, right? What happens then? And the soul revels in its own magnificence. That's just Svarupa Vastanam. The Bhagavatam is going to be, it's not a sutra. It's not limited in its verbiage. The average length of a sutra is 6 words. The commitment of the sutra writer is minimalism. You have to say as much as you possibly can in the fewest possible words. That's what it means to write a sutra. But the Puranas don't have that problem. So they can be poetic and much more elaborate. So this is the Bhagavata chapter 2. That its own magnificence is transcendent to time and Maya. But when it realizes its own magnificence, it's then able to renounce both time and Maya and exists in its own autonomy. What's that other than Svarupa Vastanam? Right, now we get to the story, but I just wanted to show you, we have these stories, but don't think that this at the expense of jnana. So I invite you, my friends, to, explore this wonderful text, the Bhagavata Purana. Okay, what story are we interested in? Right, Brahma with a long A. We mentioned how he's the first of the celestial gods last class. From the previous cycle, the being with the best karma becomes Brahma. He's the foremost teacher of the world. That's why Patanjali said, because he's the first being. So he teaches, and he makes the forms of the living entities. So that's why Patanjali says Anushasanam. The tradition picks up on that. Who was the first yogi? Teacher, fine, but also the first yogi. How so? Let's read the story. There's 2 of them. This is a short one. He sat on his seat, which of course the other story tells us, the seat is on top of the lotus. With a desire to create, because that's his dharma. He has this dharma to create the forms of the universe. And he reflected on how he might do so. So this story is a little bit more connected with creation rather than meditative practice. But we'll go to the other story. But he couldn't figure out the necessary means for creating the manifest world, universe. Because to do anything, we need to get instructions from the outside. You have to have the samskaras to do something. The samskaras come from the outside. How, especially if you're creating something. So one day, as he was deliberating in this way, the great Lord Brahma heard a voice from the water below. So we know, of course, those who know the story, that there's the cosmic ocean. In the beginning was the water, just like the Genesis. Vishnu's reclining there, lotus growing out of his navel, and the Brahma's come to consciousness on the lotus. So he heard a voice from the water below, which uttered 2 syllables, the 16th and 21st letters of the Sanskrit alphabet. So that was what I was trying to remember last time. Tapaha. This word is the wealth of the ascetics. When you renounce the world, you enjoy tapas. It's a pleasure. Just like sports people enjoy competition, or merchants enjoy the thrill of business and haggling and making a profit off of somebody. And warriors enjoy a good fight. And craftsmen enjoy the challenge of a piece of art, or creating art, and so forth. It's an enjoyment according to your gunas. So the enjoyment of the ascetics is tapas. Upon hearing this, Brahma looked all around, striving to see the speaker. It's pitch black. We know that from the next story. Upon not seeing anyone else there, he got up from his seat and decided that the voice had been for his benefit. So he just understood, he doesn't know anything. He's sitting on top of the lotus, doesn't know who he is, where he is, what's going on. He's the only being in the universe at this point. Talk about existential crisis. How about that? So clearly, he's just a voice, at least, is giving him an instruction. So taking this as if it were an instruction to perform tapas, he concentrated his mind. He did chitta vritti nirodha. So he's the first yogi. So Brahma's intuition was correct over here. With his breath and mind under control, that's your pranayama, and dhyana and dharana, with both sets of senses restrained, okay, both sets of senses. So that's the karmindriyas, jnanindriyas. That's pratyahara. So this is just a rewording of all the, Patanjali just gives us the kind of classical sutraic outline of yogic practice, but it pervades Indian tradition. It's just another version of it. He performed tapas. What's a tapas? Well, you fix your mind. That's a tapas. Control of the body, of course, that's a tapas, but control of the mind is even more of a tapas. It takes discipline. So he did it for 1,000 years. So Brahma, the greatest performer, and by the way, time is different. It's very interesting because physicists will say this. Time is different in different regions of the, of the universe. It's one of the principal laws of Einsteinian laws. Principle of relativity. Correct me if I'm wrong. So Brahma's 1,000 years here is not 1,000 years of Brahma. Right? We know this. If you go in a spaceship and you go, I don't know, speed of light or whatever, and you come back, time will have changed here in a different sort of way. So it's interesting that they knew this in the Puranas. How would they know it? They didn't have spaceships. They didn't have advanced instrumentation. So 1,000 years here, and there's a story that illustrates that. One time Brahma steals the cows from Krishna, and he goes off for one instant. He wants to, kind of test Krishna's cow herding, and he steals all the cows and cow herding boys, and he puts them to sleep in a cave. And he comes back in one instant. A year has gone by in this realm, and in that year, Krishna manifested himself into every cow and cow herd boy, so nobody knew they were missing. And every day he went back home, and all the boys went home, and the calves went to their cow mothers, and everybody was inundated in an ecstasy that Vrindavan had never seen before, because now Krishna himself has taken the form of every little boy, cowherd boy, and every little calf. The mothers didn't know that it wasn't their real sons, and they couldn't understand why they were just blissing out, nursing their children and feeding them, and their hair was just standing on end in ecstasy. It's because the Supreme Bhagavan was their child for a whole year. But the point is, Brahma had popped off for an instant, came back, a year had gone. So worshipped in this manner, Bhagavan revealed his personal abode to Brahma. Okay? It's called Vaikuntha. It's the kingdom of God. There is nothing higher that exists. It is free of all suffering, illusion, and fear. Rajas and tamas do not prevail there, nor sattva, tinged by either. It's pure. It's all made of pure consciousness, a realm with beings. And that's the goal of the bhaktas. If you say, well, what happens when you're liberated in bhakti? We know what happens if you get liberation through Patanjali. You attain your own svarupa. But what about those who don't want their svarupa, their own experience of, eternity simply absorbed in their own nature, but they want to have a love of God? What happens to them? Well, they go to this realm of Vaikuntha, infinity of realms. And there, God takes whatever form the devotee wants to love him through. You're a Krishna Bhakta, he would be Krishna. You're a Shiva Bhakta, he would be Shiva. You're Devi Bhakta, Devi has her realm, right? So time has no sway there, no Maya, what to speak of anything else. And then it goes on describing the inhabitants of that realm, all made of pure consciousness. Look, you can become one of these. Those attendants of brilliant dark hues and lotus petal eyes, they wear yellowish garments and have extremely attractive and beautiful forms. See, they're spiritual forms. But that's a topic for another day, my friends. Now we go to the second version of the story of Brahma, okay? It's relevant to what we're doing because he's the first yogi, because Patanjali says Anushasanam. So I'm just taking the opportunity to share with you my most favorite activity in existence, which is to read the Bhagavatam. So, okay. So, there we are. I'm not very good at this, am I? You'd think after all these years. Right. At that time, the beginning. Now, this is a longer version. This universe was immersed in water. Don't you find an interesting overlap with the Genesis there? Vishnu had closed his eyes. although his ability to perceive is never obscured, and was lying alone on the waters on the bed of the king of serpents, Shesha. You've seen the picture. Now, Shesha is considered to be an incarnation of, Patanjali is considered to be an incarnation of Shesha. So the stories are all very relevant to the sutras. We're reading the sutras, but nobody in India would be reading the sutras, except a few Brahmins in Rishikesh. They'd be reading the stories. They get all the information. So this is Vishnu. Vishnu has infinite forms. This is one of the forms of Vishnu. This is the form of Vishnu that associated with creation. The ultimate Godhead, of course, does not create. That's a job. And God is not bound by a job. He's not bound by a dharma. He just exchanges love with his devotees. That's Krishna in his realm and Vishnu in his realms. So this is a sort of secondary Vishnu, a Vishnu that manifests out of Vishnu, a derivative Vishnu, and he's associated with creation. He's the creator. He does a job to do. And just like Shiva does, he has to destroy the universe. So there he is, lying on the king of serpents without exertion. He was waiting for the right time and absorbed in the bliss of his own self. What's Vishnu going to meditate on? Himself. Right. With the subtle elements withdrawn within his body. So Prakriti is not manifest. We talk about Purusha and Prakriti. Well, where does Prakriti come from? What happens to Prakriti between the cosmic cycles, my friends? Sankhya and Yoga give us a few dozen verses. They don't give us the whole visual of creation. The Puranas do. So the subtle elements, right, that would be the gunas, withdrawn within his body. Vishnu aroused his Shakti power of time. Time is a Shakti. It's simply the glance of Vishnu. It's a glance. He glances and Prakriti gets aroused. What does aroused mean? Rajas agitates, and once Rajas agitates, creation can take place. Otherwise, the three gunas are in equanimity, which really means that Rajas is cancelling, Tamas is cancelling the potential of Rajas. It's counterbalancing it. And he remained upon those waters, his resting place. Anyway, so after sleeping on the waters for 1,000 cycles of the 4 yugas, basically 8 billion years, the blueprint for creation was revealed by his own power called time. Then, okay, so let's go down to Brahma's story. But I just want you to get a sense that how rich the Bhagavatam is with philosophy, with information about creation, and all kinds of things. All right, it's time which awakens karma. What awakens karma? How do the living entities in the next cycle get reconnected to the karma from the previous cycle? All these kinds of questions. But anyway, so the matter sprang up suddenly in the form of a self-manifested calyx of a lotus, illuminating that vast expanse of water. Right, so Vishnu then enters the lotus. Right, it's a manifestation of all the gunas and contain the universe within it. So within it, the one they call Svayambhu, which means manifest by himself, he doesn't have parents, was manifest. This is the beginning of the new cycle. Seated on that lotus stem, but not being able to see the worlds within it, right? Because he hasn't been given those kinds of eyes to see the subtle energy. Brahma moved his neck around in space with strained eyes. As a result of this, he obtained 4 heads, one for each of the directions. So that's how you know who Brahma is. He has his 4 heads. The lotus was surrounded by the waters, buffeted by waves, agitated by the winds, which bring about the end of the cosmic cycle. So the end of the creation, there's these catastrophic winds that cause the matter to kind of devolve into its subtler and then subtler still ingredients and return to the gunas. So they're winds. Right. Mounted upon it, that first among the celestials, Brahma, could not understand the nature of the worlds, nor even his own self. Can you imagine coming into consciousness? Waking up in the morning, because that's what he's doing. He's waking up after a cosmic cycle. Who am I? He says. This person situated on the top of the lotus. And from where has the solitary lotus and the water come? There must be something existing here beneath it, upon which it is resting. Right? He's trying to figure out what the heck is going on. Where am I? Who am I? What's all this about? So deliberating in this way, the unborn Brahma entered the waters through the fibers in the stalk of the lotus. So he goes into the lotus and down into the waters. But you can't, remember last class, you can't get to God by your own climbing. We mentioned Nebuchadnezzar, you may recall, in his stairway in the Old Testament. Same moral. Then he went down the rough lotus stalk, seeking its source, but couldn't find it. As the unborn one, Brahma, was seeking his source in the absolute darkness, there's no light. I guess, the sun hadn't been created, perhaps. A long time passed by. Time is the weapon that generates fear in embodied beings. That's Abhinivesha, the fifth klesha. What is it really? It's fear of time. What does that mean? Well, you're getting old. You fear your own demise. What is your own demise? It's a product of time. So, time is the weapon that generates fear in embodied being and wastes away their lifespans, O Vidura. Right? The story is being recounted to the sage Vidura. I'm sorry. I don't know how to get rid of that now. There we are. Okay. Somebody can please tell me how I can, not now, but every time I try to get this bar here, either it makes the whole screen go blue, or if I slide it, sometimes I can catch it, but not always. There must be an easier way of doing it. And if I do the up and down arrow, it goes too far. Maybe somebody can tell me later if there's a more elegant way of doing it. Now, with his endeavor proved unsuccessful, we take to yoga, first verse of the Sankhyakarika, actually. When you realize you're suffering, and all known means have failed to solve your suffering, then arises the inquiry to know, the inquiry, vidya. Then arises the quest for knowledge. Who am I? Why am I in the world? What's going on? So, when his endeavor proved, when our own and this is bhakti, by the way, and when we try, even our spiritual endeavors are unsuccessful. Bhakti is total surrender to Bhagavan. There's a little tiny bit of it in Patanjali, but very, very underdeveloped in the Ishvara Pranidhana. Very, very underdeveloped compared to the Bhagavatam. When his endeavor proved unsuccessful, the god with a small g, only Vishnu gets a big G, and Shiva, and Devi. The god desisted from this. He realized, by my own power, I can do nothing. I cannot understand who I am, or what the hell, what am I doing? What is existence? And he returned back to his resting place. He sat down, slowly controlled his breath, stilled his mind, and undertook the practice of the yoga of samadhi. Notice how it's referred to. Remember, the other narrative said he heard the words. If you put the two narratives together, the other one, he actually received instruction, tapaha, which is what we're receiving. What's the first word of Kriya Yoga? If you want to do how to do yoga, you'd go to the chapter on Kriya. What do I do? How do I do it? The first chapter tells us what it is and where you end up if you do it. But then you say, well, what do I do? What kriyas do I do? What? And then the very first word is tapaha. Notice in the story of Brahma, the first thing, only one word, tapaha. So if you want to do yoga, my friends, that's the first step. So, after performing the practice of yoga for a period corresponding to a person's lifespan, the other text says 1,000 years. So, there's these little things that you have to try to figure out. And then the commentators will they'll usually pick up on it. Just like Christian theologians, they look at the Bible and they say, look, well, John, the Gospel of John says this. The Gospel of John is very different from the synoptic Gospels. So the various stories are in conflict. There's details that are, that are different. So you find, obviously, the Puranas, they've been handed down for many, many centuries. So here it says 100 years, but the commentators, remember, are not going to ever say, that there is discrepancies because of human error, because they accept these texts as infallible. So they have to come up with a solution. So they may say something like, well, okay, 100 of our years, 100 of years of Brahma, you know, they'll try to say something about the difference of time spans and whatever they're, it's a bit hard to do it on this one, frankly, because the first story was 1,000 Brahma years, which should be a lot longer. Anyway, I want to get into it. Let's just stick with the story. So after performing the practice of yoga for a period corresponding to a person's lifespan, wisdom eventually dawned in Brahma. Viveka. What do you get if you in Patanjali, if you do the 8 limbs of yoga? Yoganga Anushtanad, from, right, 228. Yoganga Anushtanad, from following the limbs of yoga. Ashuddhi Kshaye, purities removed. The Jnana Deeptir, light of the Jnana of Jnana. Viveka, that wisdom. But this is exactly the same. The Puranas are just sort of, they're just kind of embellishing it enormously. When I say embellishing, that's the wrong word. They're just providing much more information on the various contexts in which the practices are performed. So, wisdom eventually dawned in Brahma. Then he saw in his heart the appearance of something he'd never seen before. In other words, he has a vision of God, just like in the other one. Both of them, he ends up with a vision. Brahma saw a solitary being lying in the waters that fill up the universe at the end of the Yuga cosmic cycle, on a couch made of the coils of the vast cosmic serpent Shesha. And again, Patanjali is considered to be that Shesha. So there's your story, my friends, of the first yogi. And I hope you'll join me later on in life. We'll do Svadhyayas on the Bhagavatam. Once we've done the Yoga Sutras, we'll do the Mimamsa Sutras, and then I suppose we'll have to do a Bhagavad Gita to tick all the boxes. And if we're going to do every verse of the Bhagavad Gita, God knows how long that will take. And then we will do the Bhagavatam until death do us part. And I hope some of you will linger in life and join us. I'll be retired, and that's how I want to end my days. So occasionally we'll have some stories like this, when hopefully we'll pique your interest in the great Bhagavata Purana. Okay, so now we go back to Yoga Sutras. Okay, so there's your tapaha. And Ishwar Pranidhana, surrender to Ishwara. And Brahma did that. He surrendered. He heard the word tapas. He knew it was coming from, the being. He knew it, so he followed it. He did tapaha. So that he did an Ishwara Pranidhana. Right now we know about kleshas. Klishtas are klishta. We did all that. And now we did how karma works. Right? The kleshas are the root of the collecting of karma, 12. And when do you get your karma? As long as we act in the world under the kleshas, which means we're ignorant of the Atman, number one. We think we are the body minds. We confuse the seer with the instruments of sight. These bodies are instruments. Everything in the body is an instrument. Right? The skin is tactile. The mind is, sorts through information. Everything is an instrument. So therefore, to think that the user, the seer, and the instruments of perception are the same, that's ego. Okay? And so the kleshas are the root of collecting karma. And when do you see your karma, Vedaniya? When does it manifest? Drishta drishta janma. In the seen or the unseen birth. And as long as the root is there, it has to bear fruit. If we're in ignorance, my friends, everything we do plants a seed of reaction. Everything. And it may come in drishta adrishta janma, in this birth or the next birth. So as long as the root is there, it has to bear fruit. If you put a seed in the ground, it's just a law of cause and effect, which governs the universe. It governs physics. We'll have to see. The last word has certainly not been spoken on quantum mechanics, whether that breaks the rule of cause and effect, we have to see. It's not clear yet. There are different theories. And whether the collapse of the wave function is actually only probable and not deterministic. We don't know that. Einstein never accepted it. And okay, and the multi-world theory doesn't accept it. They posit that everything actually is deterministic in some possible world. So there's still resistance to the idea that quantum mechanics breaks that law of cause and effect. Otherwise, everything in a Newtonian universe, if you knew the position of one, if you were omniscient, and you knew the position of one subatomic entity, and the force that it was exposed to, you would know the trajectory of the whole universe to infinity. And Patanjali makes that claim. He makes that claim in the sutras in chapter 3, that the yogi knows everything from the subatomic particle to the entire universe. It's kind of which Newton would have accepted. It's just that nobody has that knows all the variables. But in principle, the deterministic universe, in principle, if you know the position of one subatomic particle and wherever its placement, you would know everything about the forces, and you could do all the maths and the calculations and blah, blah, blah. And you would be able to determine the position of every other subatomic particle for all eternity. So that's cause and effect. Now, that's a deterministic universe. So why would behavior be any different? Of course, the yoga tradition, okay, the whole issue of free will is problematic, and I don't want to get into that now. And there's a big debate in the philosophy of religion, determinism versus voluntarism versus compatibilism, and that's an ongoing debate. So is there room for free will? And of course, the quantum mechanics has actually provided opportunity for those who say there is free will. They appreciate the fact that quantum mechanics is not deterministic as presently understood, that it's probabilistic. So those Christian philosophers especially, I'm teaching a course right now, Science and Religion. We're looking at some of the philosophers of religion and scientists who are state-of-the-art scientists and philosophers, but they happen to be theists, and how they're dealing with evolutionary science and some of these issues that that support a materialistic a vision of the universe, that there is no need for a god, there's no such thing as a soul, there's no such thing, you don't need to introduce anything supernatural, everything can be naturalism. Is basically what we could call it, naturalism. That everything can be explained by natural materialistic causes. So, all right, let's not take a detour, but it's an interesting conversation, and it's good to see, and mostly the discussions going on between Christian philosophers and scientists and materialistic ones. So we haven't seen yet Indian thinkers contribute significantly. Of course, they have plenty to offer. It's just right now at this moment in time, the Vedantins and they're contributing on the margins, but as of yet, they're not major voices in the field of science and philosophy. They will, I'm sure, they will increasingly become that. I mean, there are a few voices. I'm not saying there's none, but mostly the conversation, the main players are Christians versus materialists so far. But we look forward to seeing more involvement from Vedanta thinkers who are scientists and philosophers, trained, which means trained properly, dharmically, in those disciplines, not dilettantes, like I'm a dilettante in science. I'm not trained in it. I'm interested in it. I keep my mouth shut, except on these swadhyayas. I probably say more than I should. But anyway, but properly trained. We look forward to seeing more contribution from our Indian friends in these discussions. Okay, because they have a lot to offer, especially philosophy of mind, and because the materialists versus theists, they're arguing for a soul that thinks and feels and wills, which the Platonic Christian, the Christian notion of a soul comes from Plato, right? Because there were no, Christ wasn't a philosopher. So the early church fathers, if they wanted to create a, in the 3rd century, they wanted to create a theology for Christianity. Where were they going to get it from? They're not going to get it from the Old Testament and the New Testament. There's no philosophy there. So they borrowed it from the Greeks. In fact, some of the early church fathers were converts. They were like Origen. He was a philosopher by training, and even when he converted to Christianity, he continued to teach Greek philosophy. So those notions of what a soul is, many of these arguments that become Christian are really Greek. So in that model, the the so-called Cartesian problem, I don't know if, you know what, let's stick with our sutras. But all I want to say is Sankhya has a lot to offer by suggesting the mind is material. Materialists are right. It's consciousness that is not material. So the dualism is very different. So therefore, the discussion takes a very different turn if we consider Sankhya notions, yogic notions of consciousness. It's not consciousness and mind on one side of the great metaphysical divide and matter on the other. No, mind is on the side of matter. That really changes the sort of Cartesian problem. What's the Cartesian problem? Descartes, he said, okay, he was sort of Neoplatonist perhaps, that the soul is a separate substance. But then his critics say, well, if it's a separate substance, how can it affect matter? How can something non-material affect matter? And that becomes the Cartesian problems. It's not. It's maybe not the problem it's been built up to be, but regardless of that, Sankhya is going to say, well, actually, mind is material. Yeah, the materialists are right about that one. Mind it just happens to be sattvic, but it's matter. Consciousness, the divide is between consciousness. Now, if that becomes a major contributor to the discussion, it's going to change the nature of that conversation between materialists and, shall we say, right now it's Christians and materialists. But what about if we say materialists versus, what word are we going to give? Non-materialists, those that believe that there is another kind of metaphysical substance called Brahman and Atman. It's not material. All right, my friends, I'm taking too many detours. We've already gone through almost 55 minutes. Do you find any of that interesting, by the way? Or do you find it annoying when we take these detours?
No.
Good.
No, not at all.
Okay. Well, let's try to
stuff. Good stuff. Very good.
Let's try to be focused then for our next and get some verses done. So this karma is either pleasant or unpleasant, depending on whether the seeds were punya or apunya, whether they were pious or impious. Right? So you do good, good will come to you, but not necessarily in this life. And that's why good things happen to bad people, bad things happen to good people. Right. Now, what's the principle here? So this karma, what is the karma? Jati ayurboga, your birth you take, your lifespan, how long you stay in that birth, and your quality of life. Everything is covered in those three. There's nothing else to karma other than, if you boiled it down to its irreducible components, what is karma? The birth you take, animal or human, or or caste, meaning what kind of a human family. Number one, how long you stay in that birth, which simply means how long does it take to burn up that cluster of samskaras that needs to be accounted for in that particular body. The next life, a different cluster of samskaras. It needs a different kind of body to be accounted for. That's all life and death is. How long does it take? You've got 100,000 units of particular kind of samskaras, needs a particular dog body or some kind of body. So you take a birth that allows that Atman, that mind, that subtle body to experience that cluster. When the last samskara is accounted for, death, we call it death. But that simply means, okay, now you need to burn up another cluster, another pocket, a different kind, and that can't be accommodated They can't all be accommodated in the same body. So they need a different kind of body, and then they take rebirth. So your ayur is simply how long it takes to burn up a certain quantity of samskaras. And boga, in a life, you either, you're wealthy, healthy, wealthy, or everything. Your access to resources. I like to think of it as access to resources. Wealth, companionship, access to anything, fame, beauty, whatever we think of as the good life or the bad life. Your karma could be bad, and then you have bad. So that's your boga. But now, having said, so he's just established, if you do good, you get good karma. Now notice the next verse. Vivekana. I think this is the most important verse in the Yoga Sutras. For the Vivekana, now pay attention to the word, because we're going to have Viveka. This is the first time we meet the word Viveka. Where are we going to see it? What happens when you do the yoga? 228. Yog Anga Anushtanad. From doing the angas of yoga. Anushtana, from following them. Anu. Anu means to follow. What's the first sutra? Atha Yoga Anu Shasanam. So Anu is a prefix you can put on any verb. So from Anushtana, from following the angas of yoga, what happens? Ashuddhikshaye, there's the destruction of impurities. Jnana-dipti, light of knowledge. I don't know if Guruji gets his light of yoga from this, Guruji Iyengar. I think it's mentioned Jnana-dipti, light of yoga, Yoga-dipti. I don't know where Yoga-dipti is mentioned, but here's you have Jnana-dipti. Look at this. Here's your Viveka. Now, this is not a negation. Short without the line on top. That's a negator. If it's and you put it in front of the noun, like klishta, aklishta, vidya, avidya, sure, that means the opposite, but this has got a line on top. It's a completely different letter, so don't confuse this with a negator, negative. Means all the way up to. So from following the limbs of yoga, ashuddhi, here's a regular shuddhi is purities, short, no, it doesn't have a line on top. So ashuddhikshaye, there is the destruction of impurities. Now what happened? That means tamas and rajas, and then what happens? Now sattva, what's sattva? Jnana-dipti, what's this light of knowledge? What if we want to translate that into the language of the gunas? Light of knowledge, that's metaphor. We don't want metaphor. What is it metaphysically, in metaphysical terms? Sattva. So and what are the ashuddhis then in metaphysical terms? In the language of Sankhya, rajas and tamas. Rajas are the desires and tamas are just, negative, often negative thoughts. That they are kshaye, destroyed, kshaya, kshi, they're made weak. So what happens when that happens? Then what is this light of all the way up to viveka, kyatehe. This is the ultimate state of mind, because viveka means to be able to distinguish the Purusha and Prakriti. This is a reduplicate. We discussed reduplication. Remember, what did we say? What do we say if the verb reduplicates, the root? It means either it's a frequentative, something happens frequently, or it's an intensitive. So vivich is the vich is to separate. It's the ability to separate. A viveka, the intense ability to separate. Separate what? Separate what? We're in the world of yoga now. It doesn't mean separate the wheat from the chaff. What does it mean here? Separate Purusha and Prakriti. So here's the word viveka. Okay? And here viveka 26. This is one of the words you need to know. That's how you get rid of avidya. We'll reach these verses soon. But I want to we should make connections, my friends. So that we in our study. So there's your viveka, and here it is. The first time we meet it is the vivekin. Now it's not viveka, it's vivekin. So what is the in suffix? The in suffix is to possess something. It's a possessor suffix. Okay, you have a noun. Just go with it, my friends. Go with the Sanskrit. If you miss it, doesn't matter. Doesn't matter. Just let it go through your mind. So viveka, so take any noun. And if you own that noun, okay, then it's an in. If you're a male, so here's a book, pushtaka. If I own the book, I'm the pushtakin. You put the in, and it means that it now becomes an adjective describing a person. I'm the pushtakin, and the ladies are pushtakini. Now you know where you get yogi, yogin, yogini. The possessor of yoga is the yogin. And the in declension, now you got 80 of you are learning Sanskrit. The in declension, which you're going to get to much later on in the book. In the nominative, Ellen, are you doing Sanskrit? Say yes.
I have done it for a few years.
Are you going to join the group?
Well, maybe.
We'll take that as a we'll take that as a yes. Well,
Okay.
I think you'd love it, Ellen, and you're so smart. You would be so good at it. Trust me, I really think you would love it.
Okay, thank you.
Give it a go. So the in suffix, which has to decline, in the nominative singular becomes yogi. So yogi is really yogin. You may actually sometimes in some books it's kept as yogin. Masculine yogi, feminine yogini. So the person who has viveka, the vivekin. If he was a lady, be vivekini. So your ladies here, you're all studying Patanjali's, you're all vivekinis. So here we have the vivekin. So one who is the vivekin, he thinks it's all suffering, even good karma. The previous verse says, look, verse 14, this karma, this fruit, the karma, flada is pleasurable or paritapa or distressful. Why is somebody have good karma? They're healthy, they're wealthy, they're good family, and someone in the opposite, paritapa, this is your tapa, this is your tap. Because tap actually means to burn. It's kind of an intense kind of thing. And paritapa means intense sort of distress. So these karma is joyful or distressful based on whether the hetu, the cause, the karma that comes to you is the effect. But you planted the seed. You acted. That was the cause. Well, what's your action? Punya or apunya? Here's your negative. Punya and apunyam put together. Was it pious or impious? So somebody could read this verse and say, oh, I know how to be happy now. I'll just do good karma. I'll be a good citizen. I'll be charitable. I'll be dharmic. I'll perform punya. Use this word here, punya, piety. And I'll get good birth. And that's what most people in ancient India were doing. Non-yogis. Yogis are on the margins. What would the Vedic culture? What is the Vedic culture? Do good karma. And then in your next life, you go to a celestial realm. In this life, you'll get good things. You do your Vedic rituals. Do your Vedic fire sacrifices. Perform your dharmas. Good. In this life, you'll get the good things of life, and you go to a celestial realm. But the Vivekinaha, the wise one says, Sarvam Dukkam. This is the same as the Buddha. Sarvam Dukkam. It's all suffering, even the good birth. Why? Harinama, it's temporary. Who knows the Gita? Abrahma bhuvana loka punaravartino Arjuna. Krishna says, even Brahma, we just had the story of Brahma. Krishna says in Gita, from the highest realm, Brahma's realm, to the lowest, puna avartuno. You can't stay there. You have to come back. Patanjali calls it parinama. Gita says avartino. You can't stay there. Abrahma bhuvana loka punaravartino juna. And then Krishna says, Abrahma bhuvana loka punaravartino juna. I forget the rest of it. So the wise sees the fault. What's the defect? What's the defect in good karma? You might think, well, good karma, the last verse, you might walk away thinking, well, good karma, If I get good karma, be happy. No, not if you're wise. Why? Because parinama, because you can't, because it's temporary. You did 1,000 units of good deeds. You get 1,000 units of good karma in return, but it's 1,000 units and it runs out. And then you're back then you have to come back and start all over. So this is the parinama. And tapa, not tapa. You see the line over the ta there? It's the same root, different verb. I'm sorry, same verb, verbal root, but different noun. I'm very tired, my friends. I'm sorry. Because I'm jet lagged, and also because I had to teach a 3-hour class right before this, because I'm still I'm still at school, and science and religion, that very science and religion class, and we were studying this book, Alvin Plantinga, and he's saying actually people think that science and religion are in conflict. He says no, they're not. There's no conflict between science and religion. The conflict is between materialism and religion. Theists don't have to have they don't have any problem with evolution. What they have a problem with is unguided. To say that, all right, let's not go there. So that's the book we were studying today. Anyway, I'm a little bit tired, so don't worry. I may not take questions and answers for very long today. So
We couldn't
parinam.
see the book at all.
Okay, no worries. So the wise person, dukkam eva sarvam. Go into, Eleanor, do you mind doing a quick little saver?
Tell me.
Go online and just put first noble truth of Buddhism in Sanskrit. Same 2 words, my friends. Dukkam sarvam. This is generic in yoga, the moksha traditions. First noble truth of Buddhism in Sanskrit. Instead of dukkam sarvam, he says sarvam dukkam. It doesn't matter. You can put the adjective before or after the noun in Sanskrit. You can't in English, you can in Sanskrit. Anything come up? Oh, well, it'll give us a yell when it comes up. So the wise thinks everything's suffering. Why? Because you can't hang on to it. So there's always the fear of death. This is abhiniveshaha, because everything's temporary. And there's tapa. Now, what is tapa with a long A? Even a celestial being experiences the 3 sufferings, the 3 tapas. What are they? Your own body, mind, physical illnesses, wounds, and the mind is anxieties and fears. That's the first of the 3 tapas. Your own your own instruments of perception, I suppose you could call it, your own body, mind. And we're afflicted by samskara. Oh, that's the first. The second is other living entities, the second suffering. Other living entities cause us suffering. It could be enemies and hostile armed forces, but it could also just be your own loved ones. In fact, they cause you the most suffering. If your parents are getting old and you see them ebbing away and there's nothing you can do. So or you see your kids doing things that cause you grief, but maybe they're adults and you can't say anything anymore. So sometimes our own loved ones give us the most. So other living entities, whether they're loved ones or hostile, mosquitoes, anything. That's the second tapa. The first is your own body, mind. Second is other living entities. And the third is the environment. So that would be weather, earthquakes, tsunamis. These are the wise see, even with the best karma, you're not free from body, mind ailments. Even the celestials, they're always getting harassed by the asuras, demoniac forces in the universe, according to, the Indian folk, the traditions. They also are aware that they're not going to be a celestial forever. So there's that little fear of death, the abhinivesha. So therefore the wise sees all this. The samskaras cause us suffering. Samskaras, desires, fears. I'm not quite sure why the samskara is here, actually, because I want to get into that. So these are dukkhas. Why does the Vivekana see everything as dukkham? Because of the dukkhas of temporality, change. You can't hang on to anything. Tapa, the threefold suffering. Samskara is the mind. And also because of the guna vritti. Here's your vritti, but the guna vritti. Viroda. The gunas are always in conflict. 1 minute you're sattvic and you feel peaceful and detached and you think, finally, I'm, making a bit of progress in my yoga. And then bam, you get slammed by rajas. And some old behavioral pattern that you thought you'd gone beyond just smacks you off your feet. And you're back where you started. So there is the guna vritti, the movement of the gunas. 1 minute you're tamasic, then you're rajasic, then you're sattvic. And it's very hard to maintain your states of even your yogic. You're trying to be a good yogi and you're struggling to resist the vrittis. The rajas wants to rise up and reclaim its territory. You're trying to replace it with sattva. And rajas is not going to give up so easily. So the guna vritti. So because of these kinds of things, the Vivekana has no interest in making good karma, like the Vedic citizens. Because he sees, even if I get the best of karma, how's that solve my ultimate existential dilemma? Okay? So this is, I think, the pivotal verse. This now leads us towards the 8 limbs of yoga. Did you find it, Eleonora?
Yeah.
What is the first noble truth in Buddhism in Sanskrit?
The noble truth of suffering. Birth is suffering, aging is suffering,
Yeah, no, hang on.
illness.
That's all embellishment. There's 2 words in Sanskrit. Can you get the 2 words? It's dukkam sarvam. All of that, birth is suffering. That's all that's all added on. The actual
But
form.
you know it.
Pardon?
You know it.
No, I just want to make it, I want to just make that samskara stronger. It doesn't matter. Okay. So in Buddhism, my friends, dukkam sarvam is the same 2 words as the noble truth of Buddhism. It's just good to see it because then it, helps us remember this.
It actually takes me to Patanjali.
Yes. But did you find the actual 2 words at all online?
Yes.
Okay. It's dukkam sarvam, yes?
Sarvam Dukam.
Yeah, sarvam dukkam. Okay. Okay, everybody. So you don't think it's Buddhist, the 4 noble truths. They were accepted by all yogis. It's just the Buddha, later Buddhism enshrines them, that when the Buddha came out of a meditation after his enlightenment experience, so first he has a period of hedonism as a prince, orgies, and, his father didn't want him to, there was a prophecy that he was going to become a world conqueror. And his father didn't know what he wanted him to be, a world conqueror militarily. But he didn't know if the Chakravartin meant militarily or as a great spiritual teacher. And the father didn't want him to become a great spiritual teacher, built him these 3 palaces, one for the winter, one for the summer, one for the spring, and never let him ever witness death or old age or disease. So he created this kind of alternative reality. Anyway, to cut a long story short, the Buddha escapes. He realizes, the gods take the various shapes of an old person, a diseased person. Anyway, eventually goes through the forest. So from intense hedonism, and then intense asceticism, he became so emaciated that his teeth fell out. He had just bones. He scratched his stomach and his fingers hit his backbone. There was so little meat, and so on. And that's where the middle path comes from, because he went from one extreme to the other, and then he sat under the Bodhi tree. Famous story. Before what? And he came out and he preached his first. He gave what's called the Deer Park sermon, and that's where he shared the 4 noble truths. And Buddhist, scholars, they disagree about, how much was it, just like Christians, how much of it really goes to Christ, how much was later, right? The gospel 70 years later. So they had the Jesus Project to try to figure out which statements in the testaments are most likely to go back to Jesus, and they have their color coding thing, pink, red, and whatever. Some Buddhist scholars got 400 years, a much bigger problem. They try to figure out, well, what is probably goes back to the actual historical Buddha, and it's pretty, you know, last time I checked, it was unanimous, the Four Noble Truths in the very first sermon. And the first of those Four Noble Truths is 2 words, sarvam dukkam. All right, I just wanted to make that connection to strengthen this. Okay, so the Vivekananda thinks it's all suffering. Well, where do we go from this then? Did we give up? If everything's suffering? No, but then Patanjali quickly says, heyam dukkham anagatam, but you can avoid future suffering. The dukkham that is agatam. Agatam is to come, not come. You can avoid the future suffering that hasn't come yet. But then you may say, how? He's just told us everything is suffering. So the everything means past and present and future. How am I going to avoid future suffering? And Patanjali says, you have to know the cause of suffering. What is the hetu of the heya, that which is to be avoided, suffering? He uses the term suffering, and then after that he refers to it as that which is to be avoided, because we all want to, all sane beings want to avoid suffering. Everybody wants to avoid suffering. So to avoid it, you have to know the hetu, the cause. Well, so what's the cause of suffering then? Without knowing the cause, how are you going to be free of it? It's just like if you have a disease, you have to know the cause of the disease. Otherwise, all your attempts at remedy will fail. So what's the cause of this constant state of suffering that these traditions say we're all in, my friend? I don't know if you feel this is pessimistic. All the moksha traditions say we are all suffering. And if that sounds pessimistic, then think about it. And I think for many of us, it's empowering. Because we actually, many of us in our, when we're honest, we realize I'm frustrated. We realize I'm not the person I want to be. We realize there's something missing in our hearts. We may not admit that to anybody else because we don't want to appear to be losers. If we do start admitting it, then people don't want to hear it. Well, they send us to a doctor to take antidepressants. But actually, to understand everything is suffering. You see the difference between a Vidya and Avidya society or community? In a Vidya community, if you say everything is suffering, they'll say, well done, Vivekanaha. You received your first expression of wisdom. Don't stop there. You've got to take that realization into the path of yoga. You can't just wallow about whining. But to realize I'm suffering is considered the verse we just saw it, Vivekanaha. One who has Viveka says everything's suffering. That's a Vidya community. Our Vidya community, if you say everything's suffering, they give you antidepressants. They're not going to recognize that. They're certainly not going to recognize as wisdom. Because our Vidya society is your body-mind. Okay, you're depressed, well, go make friends. Go do something. Go join a book club. Go jogging. They'll try to give you some material suggestions, and if that fails, they'll give you medication. So if you're experiencing depression and suffering, pat yourself on the back. Except now you've got to take that viveka that I'm suffering and place it on the yogic path, invest it in the yogic journey. Otherwise, it just to wallow around saying that's clearly not what Patanjali is going to suggest here. So what is the cause of suffering? The drashtra drishayaho samyoga. Please note these 3 words. The next a few verses are going to be playing around with these words. The samyoga, the coming together of the seer and the seen. We should know what that means by now. The seer is Purusha, Atman, consciousness. And the seen is not only the world out there, but also the instruments through which we see the world, meaning the body-mind. Because they're also seen by consciousness. The mind seems to be the seer, and sometimes it's, but in the deep level sort of way, The mind is also external to consciousness. So in that sense, it's seen by consciousness. What is the cause of suffering? It's embodiment itself, my friends. According to all of these traditions, the only way to be free of suffering is to liberate consciousness from its bondage in the body-mind. This is yoga. This is Buddhism. This is Jainism. This is Vedanta. This is Sankhya. Take it or leave it. But at least know they all agree on this. They agree that desire, they agree on this, that you're suffering. If you're not suffering, why would you take a path of yoga? Unless it's some superficial, to keep trim sort of yoga. That's not yoga. That's not, yoga is chitta vritti nirodha. Okay, so if you're aware of suffering, and especially if you're aware of it relentlessly, you can't shake it off. That's your friend. That's viveka. In that Patanjali just said. But what do you do with that viveka? You don't just sit and wallow. You use that viveka to say, okay, I'm looking in the wrong places. My understanding of myself, my asmita is wrong. My mind is klishta. And you make everything aklishta then. We know what that means. You cultivate vidya. You cultivate that brahmasmi, raganuga, dasosmi, I'm a servant to Bhagavan. You cultivate a different sense of self. And then you cultivate, on the one hand, vairagya for mundane desires and desire for these Atman and Bhagavan. You change your paradigm. And that's how to be free of suffering. Take it or leave it. So here, what's the cause of suffering? It's the coming together of the seer and the seen. What is the seen? Now it's going to define these two words, so, the drashtra and the drishya. You'll notice they're both forms of the same verb. We know now a little bit about Sanskrit verbal roots. You can make many, many words from the same root. So the root is drish. And the drashtra, drish, you expand the vowel, it becomes drashtra, but it's coming from the verbal root drish. So the drashtra, and Sanskritists, you'll be looking at this agentive noun. It's an agentive noun. It's a noun that's the agent of a verb. So walk is the verb, and the walker, the talker, the doer, the giver in English is the agentive noun, because these are nouns, that they're agents. That an agent, somebody is the walker, somebody is a talker. So they're called agentive nouns. Language has its own vocabulary, nothing to be afraid of or scared of. You'll build up, you have to, if you're going to do Sanskrit, you have to build up, in addition to Sanskrit, you're going to have to learn a few, English terms, linguistic terms. And one of them is an agentive noun. It just means a noun, not an inanimate noun like a stone or a rock, but a noun that's an agent. That means a person that's doing something, a walker, a talker, a giver. Right. In Sanskrit, you put a tra suffix, tra, on, and you might have to expand the root. So from drish, you get drashtra. Now, from the same root, you get drishya, which is an object now, the seen. It's not agentive. It's not an agentive ending. This is just a regular noun, the thing which is seen. Okay, so don't mind that little detour into Sanskrit. Those of you who are not learning, just let it go through you. Just let it go through you. The cause of suffering is the samyoga. Yoga comes from yuj, to join, and sam means together. The joining together of what? When you join things together, they have to be different things. Otherwise, how do you join them together? If they're already one thing, you don't need to join them. So if you use the language of joining, there's going to be two things. What are the two things? The seer and the seen. The seer and the seen. Now we're going to talk about these two terms. First of all, what's the seen? The drishya. Here it is down here. The last word in 18. But it's got an ending on it. Drishyam. Sanskrit, you put endings on it, like Latin and German. Still, we've lost our endings in English. We've only kept the plural, S. And the genitive, apostrophe S. Book, the book's cover. You can say the book's cover, the B-O-K, the B-O-O-K apostrophe S. That's an old Indo-European ending that was retained. And the plural form S. Otherwise, English has lost its endings, but it's still got one or two, which shows they're like fossils preserved from much, much older times. And when the Germans, the Saxons came, then the German still has its endings. Some of them, nothing like Sanskrit, but they still have endings, a few. And of course, Latin then has a lot more. Rex, regem, register, rege. Remember from school, or Latin, we had to repeat them when we got smacked on the head. So rex, regem, register, rege, and so forth. So therefore, the M is the accusative ending. So what is the scene? 3 statements here. Prakasha kriya stiti shilam, semicolon. Bhutindriyatmakam, semicolon. Bhogapavarga artam. What is the scene? First adjectival phrase. Its nature, what is it made of? It's shilam. Shilam means what is it made? Its nature. What is its metaphysical makeup? Nothing other than prakasha kriya stiti. Sattva, rajas, tamas. These are synonyms. Light, action, kriya yoga. There's your kriya, action. That's rajas. Stiti, stability. These are just Sankhya synonyms. Light, action, stability, sattva, rajas, tamas. That's the nature of the scene. If you were to say, what is the ultimate nature of the world out there? To a physicist, what would they say? Subatomic substances and forces that act upon them, like gravity, electromagnetism. That's what they would say the scene is in our present modern moment in physics, in our understanding of the physics of the world. So what would a yogi have said? The ultimate. You reduce it till you get to a stop sign. Physics would have to say something like forces and particles, and they probably hope that they'll be able to actually go down into some unifying kind of, that they'll be able to unify, because particles and waves, maybe there's some unity there. If particles can collapse into waves, that opens the door to the possibility that even particles may be just individualizations of waves and concretizations of waves. So physics is the quest for physics is always to look for finer and finer substratums. Now, of course, string theory it's not everyone by any means accepts it, but looks like it's trying to combine. Anyway, let me not step out of my area of specialization, but there is this hope that there'll be this sort of unifying substrate. And well, the Sankhya tradition would say, yes, keep doing it. You're going to get to mind stuff and keep going, and eventually you get to the 3 gunas. And that's what this verse is saying. The shilam, its metaphysical makeup is prakasha kriya stiti, light, action, stability, sattva, rajas, tamas. Now, what else is it? You can think of the scene as everything is ultimately the 3 gunas. Okay, how else can you think of it? Well, you can think of it as the sense objects and the bhuta and the indriyas. You can think of it as the senses and the sense objects. This is an epistemological way of thinking about it. Right? The sense objects means the world out there. How do we know there's a world out there? Because we have senses. And then we extend them through instruments like Hubble bubble and microscopes, but they're extensions of the senses. So you can say the world out there, another way of framing it, is the sense objects, and well, you'd have to have senses to see the sense objects. So we have our senses. They're also the scene. They're also prakriti. So our eyes are made of prakriti. Our minds are made of prakriti. That's another way of seeing the scene. I'm thinking of the scene. Sense objects and the senses. So you can think of it metaphysically, the three gunas, semicolon. Or you can think of it as the sense objects and the instruments of perception, the senses themselves and the mind. Both different ways of framing it. Now, what's this artam? What's the purpose of Prakriti? Bhoga apavarga. You want to try to enjoy? Bhoga. Good luck. It gives the opportunity of bhoga, of enjoyment. Where do we see bhoga? We saw bhoga in the verse on karma. What is your karma? Let's make our connections, my friends. Here. What is your karma? Jati ayur bhoga. Jati is your birth. Ayur is how long you stay in it. And bhoga is your ability, your access to enjoyment. The means of enjoyment. Bhoga is the means of enjoyment. Wealth, health, good looks, your attractive partner, and so on and so forth. That's your bhoga. And here we have it again. What's the purpose? What's the artam? What's the purpose? Where do we have artam? Let's make another connection. Let's make another connection with the word artam. What was verse 2 of chapter 2? Here. Well, why are we doing this Kriya Yoga? Right? Chapter 2 begins with Kriya Yoga, right? You do tapaha, svadhyaya, ishvara pranidhana, right? That's the Kriya Yoga. And then the question is, well, why? And here it is, artam, twice in the same sutra. Here it is, artha stuck onto bhavana, and artha at the end. Artha means the purpose. So why am I doing this Kriya Yoga? What's the artha? Well, samadhi bhavana, to bring about samadhi. That's one. And there's another artha. But the Kriya Yoga, klesha tanu, it weakens the kleshas. Klesha tanu karana. And then we went into the discussion on the klesha. So there's your artha. Don't worry about the ending. That's just Sanskrit grammar. Artaha artash. Now we have that same artha, my friends. So we make these connections, and they just enlighten, just help us to feel, we're doing some real study here, and we get a little, when when you realize the connection between a word, you get some satisfaction. You're studying. That's aklishta. That's aklishta. It's a sacred text. So these little eureka moments, there's nothing wrong with them. They are klishta. They cut your Sarasvati will give you your little eureka moments. So what's the artam? Right? The artam of Kriya Yoga is to give samadhi and to weaken the kleshas. What's the artam of the scene? What's the purpose of Prakriti? Why? Bhoga apavarga. You want to try to enjoy it? Go for it. But remember the rules. Every action is a reaction. When you realize sarvam dukkam, when you get viveka, I'm expecting you to remember these names when we spend time on a word. Try to remember it, my friends. Vivekanaha, the one who has viveka. Sarvam dukkam. So when you realize all this bhoga, these attempts at bhoga, attempts at finding happiness through bhoga, through material resources, fails. I'm still not satisfied in my deep level self. Then apavarga is another name for moksha or nirvana. That prakriti gives you the opportunity to free the Atman. Because who's doing yoga? Not the Atman. The mind. Who's doing chittavritti nirodha? The mind is nirodhing itself. Nirodha samskara. It's kind of self-destroying itself. It's a little counterintuitive, but that's what it is. So therefore, why is Prakriti there? As long as you think I'm body avidya, as long as you're in a state of avidya, and you think I'm body-mind, and then as long as you think asmita, I'm this very body-mind, I'm male, I'm female, I'm black and white, I'm this and that, and then you chase the ragas. What is a raga? Is memories of things that felt good in the past that you try to recreate them in the present. When you go out to look for fun, you were out on a Saturday night. What do you seek? You seek something that gave you pleasure in the past. Well, this is a good restaurant over here. There's a good ice cream place over there. there's good this, that, and that's just memory. So therefore, that's boga. When you get fed up, when you realize, no, this is fail. How old do we have to be? How many times do you have to come back? How many times do you want to come back? How old? And you get wrinkles, your teeth. What do you're still going to hang in there and try to find boga? How pathetic is that? So the yoga tradition said, hang it up. You will never find it. All of them say that. It's not like one text says it, my friends. They all say it. Oh, either take it or leave it. But if you're going to say, oh, I like the Gita, well, then what is it saying then? The desire can never give you happiness. So therefore, the purpose of the scene, which is a synonym for prakriti, is it gives you enjoyment, or when you realize that's false, that it's a false, it's an illusion, it's maya, then you seek liberation. Prakriti, right? We read Patanjali, that's made of prakriti. Words are made of prakriti. Your mind is processing the information, that's prakriti. So it's prakriti that can deliver either boga or apavarga to you in the form of the mind. Okay? I don't want to get into 19, my friends. It's not, I don't want to get into it. And I know we said we'd do every single sutra. Please read the book. We're not going to get much benefit out of this, and it's going to take a bunch of time. So I'm not doing number 19. It's just a sort of a technical. Don't think you're missing out on any deep sort of wisdom information. Read my book. If you have a question, you can get. But right now, what's the siya? Drashta. Basically, okay. I guess we said we'd do every sutra, right? Right, the guna parvani, the stages are, you have to look at your Sankhya charts. And if I should have probably had it available. Okay, I hate to keep asking our faithful stalwart, Eleonora. You're doing such a great service, Eleonora. I hope, please let me know if you feel that we're imposing on you too much. Do you have the Sankhya chart that we can bring up?
Yes, I'm looking for.
Okay, let's read the text. The different stages of the guna qualities, the guna parvani, they consist of the particularized, the unparticularized, the distinctive, and the indistinctive. Do you know, I can't remember what I did this so long ago. Okay, friends, we will do it. I'm gonna have to do
Make
this.
me share.
No, I'm gonna have to. I can't remember. I'm gonna have to do it next week.
Okay.
I'm sorry. It's been, how long has it been? When was that book published? It's got to be 10 years. Vishesha Abhishesha Linga Matrani.
More.
The particularized. I think it's definitely the Sankhya chart. So you have buddhi, and then you have evolving from that. You have ahankara. Evolving from that, you have the qualities, the tanmatras, and the mahabhutas. But I don't want to just mumble my way through this. I want to give you a proper explanation, and bear with me. We'll do it next week. Now, okay? It's still talking about the scene, and it's just talking about the Sankhya chart, and it's just dividing it up and it's categorizing it in these 4 ways. And I can't quite remember which one is which. Right, the siya, drashta. Right, now we know what the scene is. Okay, the scene is Sattva, Rajas, and Tamas, number 1. The senses and the sense objects, number 2. And it is there for your boga or your apavarga, for your try to enjoy it if you feel that you can, which you can't. And when you get frustrated, you seek liberation. That's what some of us are doing in our various practices. I hope you realize you're not doing your practices to be healthy, my friends. I'm talking about you do it whatever you want. That's none of my business. But if you're talking about traditional practices, you're not doing it to be healthy and calm. Those may be side effects. But The goal of yoga practice is to be free of all desires and to become liberated. Either in your own Atman, or if you're Bhakta and you don't want to get off the train right there, you want to keep going because you believe in a greater Atman, you still want to get rid of your desires and your material embodiment, and then you want to have a relationship with Bhagavan. We just read the verse about Vaikuntha. I hope you realize that's what the goal of yoga is, not some kind of a new agey, feel good and be happy in the body. No, 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 no. If that's what you're doing it for, it's your business. That's fine. No one can tell you not to, and no one can say that's bad, but that's not what any of these traditions are saying it's for. That's what you call a commodification of yoga. Becomes a commodity. Just another way of trying to feel good in the body. No, that's not. The rishis are not going to give their blessings on that. Right. So what is the siya? What do you say about the siya? You can't say anything because if words come from samskaras, and samskaras come from imprints of material things. So the Atman's not a material thing. So what can you say? You can say something vague like Sat Chidananda. So Patanjali doesn't look at it, he doesn't say anything. What is the siya? It's just seeing the drishi. What is the drashta, the siya? It is drishi matra. It is just the power of consciousness. It's just seeingness. It's merely the power of seeing. Remember, seeing here doesn't mean eyeball seeing, visual seeing. It means consciousness. And what else does he say? Shuddho api, even though it's pure, what does pure means? It doesn't need to be mixed with the world. It doesn't need, we don't need to be conscious of the world. We don't need to be conscious of the mind. We can be absorbed in our own svarupa. So pure means not mixed. So even though it's pure, pratyaya anupasyaha, it is absorbed in the content of the mind, the pratyayas. It witnesses the image of the mind. We don't need to. This is basically a rephrasing of 2 and 3, of 3 and 4. The first chapter, 3 and 4, right? Yoga anusasana, tadadrashtu sarupe vastanam, right? So that's 2. Svarupe vastana means you're absorbed in your own pure nature. And then what's sutra number 4? Vritti sarupyam. Or if you're not in your own nature, then you're absorbed in the vrittis. The vrittis are the pratyayas, same thing. So even though it's pure, it's witnessing, it's absorbed, it's absorbed in the world of mental content. Important. Tad artha eva drishyasya atman. And the seen is there for the seer, not for itself. Prakriti is dead. It's inanimate. It has no teleology. It has no purpose for itself. Its purpose is just for the Purusha. And what is its purpose? For the Purusha, we just read it. Bhoga apavarga. Prakriti is there. You want bhoga? Okay, good luck. Even you do good karma and you get good so-called bhoga, the Vivekana is going to say, sarvam dukkam. Why? Because the fruits you gained through your good karma are temporary. And then you come back down, and there's no guarantee next time you'll be good. And even if you are, when are you you still have to get old. You still have to suffer the 3 tapas. Remember the 3 tapas. Suffering of your own body, mind, number 1. Suffering inflicted by other living entities, number 2. Environmental, number 3. So therefore, what's Prakriti there for? It's there for the seer. And you connect number 21, my friends, to a little arrow. What is it there for the seer? For what? Here, connected to Bhoga Apavarga in verse 18. It's there for the seer in what sense? It's there to give it Bhoga or Apavarga. Apavarga is another term for moksha, also known as nirvana. Okay. Now, Krita Artam, when it's accomplished its purpose, right, which is, in this sense, it's Apavarga, when Prakriti finally gives us liberation, when our minds succeed in our practices, it's accomplished its purpose. So then it's Nashtam. Then Prakriti is destroyed for us. We're no longer aware of Prakriti. Why? Because Swarupa Vastanam, we're absorbed in our own nature. That means we're not aware of Prakriti anymore. What else does it mean? If consciousness is only conscious of consciousness, then it's not aware of Prakriti then, is it? So another way of putting it ceases to be. It doesn't actually cease to be, because why? Anashtam tadanya. It doesn't cease to be for everybody else. Sadharana tvat, because it's common. All right, look at the translation. Although the scene, Prakriti, ceases to exist for one whose purpose is accomplished, what is that purpose? Apavarga of 18, the liberated Purusha. So Prakriti ceases to be, doesn't actually metaphysically not exist anymore. It just means that Atman is now absorbed in its own nature. So it ceases to be for that Atman, but it has not ceased to exist altogether. So this is not Advaita Vedanta. Although some try to put a Advaita gloss on it. The difference between Sankhya and Advaita Vedanta, they both agree that when the Atman is absorbed in its own nature, it's infinite and not aware of anything else. It has an infinite, anantam jnanam satyam. Actually, Satchidananda is not in the Upanishads, that phraseology. It may actually, I think it may, I'm not sure even if it's in Shankara, it may be in post-Shankara, in Advaita Vedanta, that trilogy, that triad, that such common phrase, right? Satchidananda, you don't find that particular exact wording in the Upanishads, nor the Vedanta Sutra. It's quite recent in the sense that, Shankara, right? What do you find instead? In the Taittiriya Upanishad, you don't have Satchidananda, you have Satyam, Jnanam, Ananta. Not Ananda with a D, Ananta. The Satya means the state of truth. And Jnanam is consciousness. And then Ananta is infinite. So the Taittiriya, that's a description of Brahman. That it's infinite consciousness. So it's kind of a early version of what later becomes Satchidananda, that becomes much more common. Right. So, but it's not destroyed. So that liberated soul is now in a state of Satchidananda, or if you want to go with later phraseology, or if you want to go with the Taittiriya, in a state of Satyam, Jnanam, Ananta. But it doesn't cease to be for everybody else. It's common to everybody else. So the difference between Advaita Vedanta and this is, Advaita Vedanta would say the world is unreal. It was never there in the first place. It was a mirage. And Sankhya would say, no. That's incoherent. If you say it was a mirage, well, what caused the mirage to appear then? You're going to run into all kinds of problems. So no, Sankhya says, no, it's real, but the liberated soul just ceases to be aware of it, but that doesn't mean it disappears. Somehow it was never there in the first place. So they disagree with Advaita on that point. But the experience is the same. Both Advaita Vedanta and Yoga would agree that it doesn't matter whether it's real or unreal, because when you attain that state, you're in a state where you're only aware of pure consciousness, and it's infinite. Now, whether there's other individual souls experiencing that or not, it's irrelevant. Your experience is an Advaita experience. So the difference is whether it's a metaphysical difference, and hopefully you got the point. Is the world real, or was it never real? That's the debate. That's the differing, the distinguishing. That's the philosophers are going to debate on that. But the liberated souls don't care, because they're, whether you're an Advaitin or a Sankhya, liberated Sankhya follower or liberated Advaita follower, your experience is identical. You're having identical experience of moksha. So what do you care what the philosophers are saying back in terra firma, back in the samsaric halls of debate? What do you care? There's no you. There's just an infinite eternal experience, and both Sankhya and Advaita Vedanta attain that state. Now, so that's verse 22, that Prakriti ceases to sort of appear for the liberated, but not for everybody else. 23. What is samyogaha? Right? So now, we're looking at three terms. Let's keep our eye on the ball. Got to keep our eye on the ball. We're looking at the cause of suffering. The Vivekanaha says it's all suffering. Vivekanaha, sarvam dukkam. The Buddha is a Vivekanaha. That's what Buddha means. Buddha, he's awakened. He has Viveka. Now, everything's suffering. So what's the cause of dukkam? What's the cause? Right? It's not my karma, because even if I make good karma, I'm still going to suffer. Patanjali just told us. So then what's the cause? It's the drashtra drishayo samyogaha. These three words. These three words are going to take us right up to the 8 limits of yoga. So make sure you know the three words. There's the drashtra, the seer, the drishya, the seen, and the samyoga, the coming together of them. Okay, now we've spoken about the seer. We've spoken about the seen, sattva, rajas, tamas, the senses and the instruments of perception, and it's there for bhoga or apavarga. Okay, and the seer is just pure consciousness. Okay, and so we had those verses. Now, what is samyoga? Samyoga is the means of understanding the nature of the powers, Shakti. There's your Svarupa. And you don't need me to go back to surely you don't need me to scroll back to 1, 2, 3. What happens if you Chitta Vritti Nirodha? Tada, then what happens? Sutra number 3. Please learn the first 4 sutras. Everybody, you must. And please, your Dharma. If you don't already... Yes, and if you don't know, thank you. And if you don't know them, my friends, if you don't know those first 4 sutras, please learn them. I'll never know if you do or you don't, but I think you should, you in your interest to learn those 4 sutras. Now, but Svarupa, what happens when you Chitta Vritti Nirodha? Tada, then, drashtuhu, it's the same drashtra, drashtuhu is the same drashtra we've had here, slightly different form. The drashta, I is the nominative ending, drashtuhu is the genitive ending. Same. Just the ending, because the case is different. Here it's nominative. In this sutra number 1.3, it's genitive. Right. Now then. So, we skipped over that. Right. So the means of understand samyoga is the way to understand the Shaktis, the powers of the Sva and the Swami. Another way of saying the seer and the seen. The owner and the owned. The Swami means the owner. And it means the Swamis as a sannyasi means the controller, the owner of the senses, the controller of the senses. So who's the owner? Consciousness. And what's the owned? Prakriti. Just another way of saying the seer and the seen. The owner and the owned. Or what did I got here? The possessed and the possessor. Don't worry about it. You're not going to get much mileage out of that. Don't lose sleep over that. It's not saying very much. Now, what's the cause of samyoga? Samyoga is the coming together of the seer and the seen, the owner and the owned, consciousness and Purusha and Prakriti, consciousness and the objects of consciousness. That's samyoga. What causes samyoga? What's its hetu? Hetu is the cause. Avidya, we know what it means. Now you know why Patanjali says avidya is the field of the others. He just mentions avidya here. He doesn't have to mention all the kleshas. So what causes samyoga? What causes the coming together of the seer and the seen? Ignorance. Because of avidya. Now, of course, if you say what is ignorance, you're not going to get an answer. Krishna says in the Gita, it's Maya. Devi Hiyasha Guna Mai. What is ignorance? It's the gunas. Devi Hiyasha Guna Mai, Mama Maya. Duratyaya, it's very hard to overcome. Mameva ye prapadyante Maya metam tarantite. If you surrender to me, Krishna says, you'll overcome it. Patanjali doesn't come out and say it, but he certainly, his Ishvara Pranidhana definitely is in that vein. Because later on he's going to say, Ishvara can give you samadhi. Same thing. It's just very underdeveloped because it's a sutra. Sutras are minimalistic. Gita's a shloka, not sutra. Shloka's verses. So therefore much more, in meter and rhyme and much bigger. It's quantitatively more content. So the cause of samyoga, we're keeping our eye on the ball. We're suffering. Everything's suffering. We try to bhoga, fail. Okay, why are we suffering? Patanjali says because it's the coming together of the seer and sea, because you are in a body, trapped in the world of sense objects. That's the cause of suffering. There's some yoga between the seer and the seen. There's a coming together. What causes that some yoga? Avidya. Verse 25. Tadabhava to some yoga bhava. When ignorance is absent, bhava is to be, abhava, not to be. When so there's two abhavas. When the tad, ignorance, that's the tad, refers back to avidya. When avidya is absent, samyoga is absent. You get rid of ignorance, get rid of samyoga. Hanam, freedom, freedom. Tadrishahe kevalyam. This is the liberation of the seer. So how do I get rid of this avidya? With vidya, also known as viveka. Viveka kyatir. Through viveka, through wisdom, they're uninterrupted. Aviplava. You can't just have the odd Kodak moment of wisdom, my friends. You have to be, the mind has to be situated in wisdom constantly. The mind has to be transformed into an enlightened mind, a buddha, an awoken, in many different ways of describing it. That is the means. So viveka gets rid of avidya, and avidya gets rid of samyoga, and samyoga gets rid of suffering once and for all. No, nothing else can get rid of suffering according to the yoga tradition. Okay, so we're suffering. The cause is samyoga of the seer and the seen. Samyoga is caused by avidya. We get rid of avidya, we need viveka. And tasya saptadha pranta bhumihi prajna. And this viveka has 7 ultimate stages, and I can't even remember what they are. It's just listed. I found them very unhelpful. They didn't, the commentaries clearly, in my opinion, just were repeating, just listing these 7. I didn't find any kind of discussion about them. So they were, in my opinion, and I may be wrong, they were just sort of duplicating the list of 7 in a scholastic sort of way. And we can read that again next week if we want. What are these 7 stages? Because I don't have them. But we're going to stop here now. So now the question is, how do I get this viveka, which is going to get rid of avidya, which is going to get rid of samyoga, which is the only way, the samyoga of the seer and the seen, and going to get rid of that, which is the only way of being free of suffering. Now the last question is, how do I get this viveka? And here we have our 8 limbs. Yog anga anushtanad. From practicing the 8 limbs, ashuddhikshaye, impurities have destroyed, jnana deepti, light of knowledge, all the way up to viveka. Okay? Is everybody clear? We can start this end or we can start this end. We start this end. I'm suffering. I try to solve it by fail. Patanjali tells me, well, I'll tell you why you fail, because you don't understand what suffering is. You think you can solve it by material tinkering about, with the material, money and whatever it might be. The cause of suffering is embodiment itself. So the cause of suffering is the samyoga, coming together of the seer and the seen. The samyoga of a drashtra drishya. That's the samyoga. Now, what causes the samyoga? Avidya. Get rid of avidya. Samyoga is removed and there's freedom. So how do I get rid of this avidya? Viveka. Or how do I get the viveka? From following the 8 limbs of yoga. And we'll quickly look at them and we pick up next week. What are these 8 limbs of yoga? What are they? Yama, niyama, and we're familiar with this. We all learned this for our teacher training courses. Yama, niyama, asana, pranayama, pratyahara, dharana, dhyana, samadhayaho, astav, angani. The 8 limbs. We will translate them next week. Okay, but we started here. Suffering, because and the cause of suffering is the samyoga of the seer and the seen coming together. The samyoga is caused by avidya. Avidya is removed by viveka. And I get my viveka from doing the 8 limbs of yoga. And what are they? Yama, niyama, asana, pranayama, pratyahara, and dharana, dhyana, and samadhi. Okay, so now we start the other end and we finish. If I say to you, why are you doing this asana? You say, oh, it's one of the 8 limbs of yoga. And I say, why are you doing the 8 limbs of yoga? Because it produces viveka. What are you going to do with the viveka? It's going to remove avidya. Why do you want to remove avidya? Because it removes the sanyoga of the seer and the seen. Why do you want to remove the samyoga of the seer and the seen? Because it's the only way of removing suffering. Oh, I understand that. So whether you start this end or that end, that's the sequence. One more time. Starting this end. I'm suffering. Why? Ultimately, good karma is not going to help me. It's better than bad karma, but it's not going to solve my suffering. So why am I suffering? Samyoga of the seer and the seen. Coming together. What causes samyoga? Avidya. How do I get rid of avidya? Viveka. How do I get viveka? The 8 limbs of yoga. Now let's start this. The other side. Why are you doing this asanas and stuff? 8 limbs of yoga. Why are you doing that? To get viveka. What are you going to do with that? Get rid of avidya. What's that going to do? It's going to disrupt the samyoga. And what happens then? Then I'm free from suffering. Oh, okay, that I understand. Everybody clear about this lead up, the preamble to the 8 limbs of yoga, which is what you all are doing. Those of you that do yoga, at least you probably have some relationship with the 8 limbs. Okay, very quickly then. Kriya yoga, tapas vidyaya ishva pranidhana. Why am I doing it? To get samadhi and weaken the kleshas. What are the kleshas? Ignorance, ego, raga, dvesha, biniveshaha. Fine. And what do these kleshas do? They create karma. What is this karma? Jati ayoboga, the birth, your lifespan, your quality of life. And what else? Well, they're hlada paritapa. They're this birth, your lifespan, quality of life are either joyful or distressful based on whether your deeds, the deeds that cause these to be the fruits, were pious or impious. And if they're pious, and then the next verse, oh, but the Vivekananda says it's all suffering, even good karma. Well, why would he say a thing like that? Because parinama, it's all temporary. What else? Oh, you still have the 3 tapas. You still have, you see, yeah, 4 p.m. next week. Yeah, one more class, 4 p.m. I'm still in the UK next week. But the clocks don't go back. In Britland, they turn it back 2 weeks after America. So there's 4-hour difference for the UK people. Yeah, but for the Americans, the same thing. Eastern Standard Time in your America is 4 p.m. See, for me, it's 9. Okay, so then, okay, why would the Vivekananda say something like that? Because any birth is temporary, still subject to the 3 sufferings, your own body, mind, other living entities, environment, etc. Gunas are always shifting, okay? So then, does that mean I'm doomed forevermore? Is this like Satan? Is this like hell in the old medieval Christianity? I'm forever doomed to suffering? No, why not? Well, you have to understand what is the cause of suffering. What is it then? It's the seer and the seen, samyoga, coming together. Okay, great. Thank you. What is the samyoga? What causes samyoga then? Well, avidya. Okay, well, that's not very helpful. You're just passing the buck along. How do I get rid of this avidya? Viveka. Well, come on, you still haven't answered, still haven't been very helpful. How do I get this viveka? How do I get viveka that gets rid of avidya, that gets rid of samyoga, that gets rid of dukkham? Oh, you do the 8 limbs of yoga. Okay, finally, we're getting somewhere. What are the 8 limbs of yoga? Yama, niyama, etc. It all fits together, my friends. I'll take a few questions, but I'm pretty much knackered, as they say on this side of the Atlantic. Knackered, which literally means a castrated bullock. Knackering, the knackering yard. If there's no hands up, I'm going to quickly take advantage of, okay, Subhash.
I have a question about this Sutra number 22, where we said once the purpose of Purusha is served, the Prakriti is destroyed, nashta.
Yeah.
Now, for someone who has attained liberation, if he's still living in this body,
Yeah.
he still will need Prakriti to be alive, to be able to function in this world.
Yeah, but
Why
when you're in the state of Nirbija Samadhi, you're not aware of Prakriti. When you're in that Nirbija state, Prakriti is not on your sphere of awareness. Now, you still have to live out the rest of that life. So then at some point, your karma is going to activate. Your mind will, and you'll need to eat or something, go to the bar. So then your karmic body will demand attention. And then you come back into the realm of Prakriti, yes. So that's the Jivan Mukta. But the end of that life, that's it. Then there's no more awareness of Prakriti.
Right. Okay. Yeah. Thank you.
You're welcome. Sankhya Sutra says it's like the potter's wheel. When you put kinetic energy, you pump the potter's wheel. You put kinetic energy in it. Now you take your foot off, the wheel doesn't stop because you've already invested kinetic energy into it. It has to stop when that kinetic energy expires. Or a modern example, you plug in your electric fan, then you unplug it, it doesn't just stop. It has to burn up its kinetic. So therefore, the karma's been activated at birth. You become a Jivan Mukta at the age of 40, but your karma requires you to live till 60. You still have to live up that last 20 years. Any other questions, my friends? Otherwise, I'm going to bid you all farewell and good night, and we will see you. We'll do the 8 limbs of yoga, and we may be able to do it in one more session or 2 more, and that's going to be it until we start in a few months. When I don't know when, we will then do chapters 3 and 4. So I think we probably need a couple more sessions, and that's fine. Okay. Good night. Good night to you all.
I
Yeah.
couldn't figure out how to raise my hand.
If you go down to the where it says
But I have just a very quick question.
yes.
I just was wondering, like, when he's talking about how you see everything as suffering, that's for the unrealized yogin, right? It's like not for someone who's already Svarupa Vastanam, right?
It's the Vivekanaha. The wise person sees everything as suffering. But okay, I see where you're going. Okay, when you're in the state of samadhi, you're in your state of bliss. Okay, that's probably where you're coming from. So when you're in Nirbija Samadhi, you're experiencing the Satchidananda of the Atman. And even before you get there, when the mind itself is in a state of asmita or ananda samadhi, remember, the penultimate, one of the 4 sabija samadhis is ananda. So that, when you're in these deep meditational states, you are in a state of bliss. And I think that's what you mean. But when you come out of that, like the Buddha, and you look at the world, you see sarvam dukkam. That's why the great teachers go out and teach. They see everyone is suffering. Why are they suffering? Because they're trying to find happiness through their body minds. So that's the sarvam dukkam. But obviously that someone, when they're in they're in their samadhi states, they're not experiencing suffering. Of course not. They're either experiencing the pure nature of the Atman if they've made it all the way to Nirbija, but even if they haven't, if they're in a sabija state, they're in a state of very, 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 very reified sattva. And the nature of sattva is happiness, not the bliss of the Atman. It's a prakritic happiness, but it's not a state of, it's called sukham, which is the opposite of dukkam. But the wise see the suffering of humanity. That's why they teach. But they, like any benevolent being, they want to solve suffering. But their solution to it is very different than, let's say, a doctor or a philanthropist or a social worker, because these other ways are trying to solve suffering through the body and the mind. So doctors are trying to cure the ills of the body. And so the benevolent politician is trying to create benevolent political structures, and so on. But the bodhisattvas and the jivan muktas, they don't disagree with that at all. They encourage that, but they would say that doesn't ultimately address the ultimate cause of suffering, which is embodiment itself. So that, of course, philanthropy is good, it's sattvic and all of that, and they encourage that, and that Dharma tradition deals with all of that. The Dharma Sutras is how to create a benevolent society where all the citizens have some kind of a, well-being. But the bodhisattvas totally support that, encourage the kings to oversee that. But their message for those who want to go, who are not seeking boga, remember, what's the purpose of prakriti, boga, pavarga? If you're seeking boga, then be dharmic. At least be dharmic and make good karma. Remember, Patanjali says if you do punya, you get pleasure, you get sort of happiness. If you do apunya, these are just synonyms for dharma and adharma. So the great beings encourage that. Fine. If you want to seek boga, at least be dharmic. But for those who have the ears to hear, for those with yogic inclinations, they're going to say, well, actually, vivekanaha sarvam dukkam. Even good karma is ultimately not going to solve the problem of suffering because it's temporary and you could just come back and start all over again. Okay. Any other questions, my friends? Good night. Okay. I'm going to stop recording and I'm just going to.
Thank you.
Yeah, good night.
Thank you, Dr.